This morning, I already talked about a senior developer over at Overwatch. So a senior Activision Blizzard developer who is all offended at gamers for looking at data like the Steam player counts of games and criticizing AAA. How dare you guys criticize the corporations? You're supposed to be a bootlicker like the Overwatch devs are and the modern audiences. And so I just finished that video. Consider checking it out if you haven't already. And now we have Josh Sobel, the infamous Highguard, or I should say Wildlight dev, of course that being the dev studio that made Highguard, who previously made the infamous post where he was whining about people laughing at Highguard. And he went on to say things like, everyone I knew who had any connection to the team or project had the same sentiments. This is lightning in a bottle. I trust this team wholeheartedly. If there's one project nobody in the industry is worried will fail, it's yours. This has mainstream hit written all over it. There's no way this will flop. I could play this game all day. The internal pre-reveal feedback, even from unbiased sources, was quite positive. Oh yeah, that was definitely unbiased stuff right there. Absolutely. Well, we're not out of touch. You guys are. Anyways, I don't want to rehash that entire wall of text he made. That was just a small part of it. It would take maybe 10 to 15 minutes to go through the whole thing again, and hopefully everyone's familiar with that. So, same guy. And if you forgot, or let me just refresh your memory, after he got criticism for that post, he went on to delete that post and then delete his entire Twitter account. And so that takes us to this post that he made yesterday, his big comeback. Here's what he says. Since I reactivated my account, I'll address the elephant in the room. My now deleted tweet following the Highguard layoff news a month ago was a mistake. I was stressed, devastated, angry, and running on 2 hours of sleep. It was not wise to take my pain to the internet in that volatile state. However, I stand by the intent behind much of what I said, but I phrased it poorly, and some of my anger was misdirected. I believe the online discourse around Highguard had some very dark corners. Dark corners, okay, bro. That may have accelerated the timeline of our failure beyond the natural outcome of the reasonable critique. But it wasn't the primary cause, and I don't personally believe the ultimate outcome would have been thoroughly different without it. There were a lot of elements involved, and there's no way to know how it would have gone under different circumstances. I restored my Twitter account a few days before the 1 month no recover date, because I value the connections I've made on here. I'll be keeping replies locked to accounts I follow for the time being, because I maintain the right to protect my mental health. It's time for the next chapter. Thanks for listening. What is this guy doing? Does he just like the attention or something? This is such bizarre behavior. Why are you dragging all of this up again? And why are you making some announcement about returning to Twitter? Arguably, this guy made Wildlight look worse than any other dev at Wildlight. And now here he is a month later. By the way, I want to dig this all up again, but I deleted it first for my mental health, but I'm back now and letting you all know. What are you doing with your life, bro? And yeah, I know he said that he restored his account for his connections or whatever, but that doesn't mean he needs to dig up all this other stuff and make this announcement and all this other stuff he did before that. It doesn't explain his bizarre behavior throughout the last, let's just say, 3 months or so. Some people might be thinking that I'm being too critical on this guy, but let me point something out. So he refers to his prior post, right? Saying that he stands by what he said in the prior post, just that he phrased it poorly. And he goes on to say that he believes the online discourse around Highguard had some very dark corners that may have accelerated the timeline of the game's failure. In other words, he's trying to justify his prior post by saying that there were these dark corners against Highguard. Except there's a big problem with his claim there. His claim doesn't actually match reality. Let me explain. You see, before he made his post, most of the discourse around Highguard was people joking and memeing about it being Concord 2. In my initial coverage about the Highguard reveal at the Game Awards, I even said that I thought the memes were funny, and that Highguard did look really mid, but that I didn't want to forget just how exceptional Concord really was, because I would still place it at least 1 tier above Highguard in how exceptionally bad it was and how far it delved into DEI policies. So you could even say that I slightly defended Highguard on that premise. Not a very dark cornery thing to do, is it? But aside from all of that, there was also a lot of great criticism about the game going on at that point in time as well. For example, people that were playing it were saying how the maps were too big for 3v3. And then sure enough, the other devs at Wildlight actually agreed because they implemented 5v5 shortly after. So it's very flawed for Sobel to try justifying his point by saying that there were these dark corners against Highguard. It's a very immature thing to say, and it's also just not true. Funny enough though, after he made his post, the criticism did become much more harsh because he accidentally exposed the toxic positivity culture going on over at Wildlight, and people also didn't like how he attempted to gaslight the internet and play victim. Now, while the criticism did become more harsh, like I said, this was also still entirely justified because of his own actions. But of course, as usual, this guy just doesn't see things for the way they are. No, he's got to try and add his spin. Furthermore, something I covered back in December 2025 and again on February 12th, 2026, is how Sobel was actually already complaining about gamers as far back as December 13th, 2025, a mere 3 days after the Highguard reveal at the Game Awards 2025. As even back then, he was misrepresenting what was actually occurring and he was playing victim, similarly also locking his account down only to come back not long after. This manipulative behavior of his was then replicated once more in February in his infamous wall of text post. His manipulative rhetoric occurring in various ways, such as when he tried to act like he was getting a barrage of comments from gamers saying to him that Highguard was quote-unquote woke trash. However, you can actually fact-check this by searching his and that exact terminology, quote, woke trash, unquote, and see that there was only actually 2 people that ever said that to him. And one of them had 0 likes on their post, and the other person only had 1 like on their post. This was, in other words, something that almost didn't happen at all. Yet he tried to greatly overstate this in a disingenuous attempt at muddying the waters, and again to appease his own victim mentality. So yeah, I might be critical of this guy, but it's for good reason. For months, he's been displaying this exact same behavior. And this recurring theme where he misrepresents things, locks down his comments, even deletes his account, and then comes back shortly after playing victim more than ever, and coming up with his new spin. Like I said, it's extremely immature, bizarre behavior, and also a perfect display of the massive lack of professionalism that is infesting AAA. We'll close with a little public reception. Some of the responses to Sobel include this one, for example, that reads, "You called yourself an indie dev with an indie team, making an indie passion project while obfuscating the fact that you were funded wholly by Tencent. Not partially or mostly, wholly funded by Tencent. Exile yourself, leave the industry in the disgrace you've earned, scumbag." In another response, we can see this user posting, "You claim to have been under immense stress and lack of sleep leading up to your deleted essay, in which you blamed everyone other than the studio that made Highguard for it failing. And here you are again doubling down. So you learned nothing from this after all. Pity." Conversely, however, we have this response that seems to be defending Josh Sobel. Reads, "Josh is not wrong. Gaming discourse right now is unbelievably toxic. Doesn't matter if your game is good, mediocre, or bad. Under any post about it, there will be scores of people like dead game, utter trash, etc. This isn't sustainable, to be honest." And then there's this one that's a little bit more long-winded. Let's check this out. This will be the last one I read. It says, "Well, unlike you, I fully stand by what I told you a month ago. You and everyone who worked on Highguard are incompetent people who should never work in the game industry again." By the way, they had a couple of Concord devs that went over there. Remember? I think there was like 2 of them, but that's pretty funny. It's bad enough to surround yourself with yes people who are incapable of creating a fun game, but then you double down on rejecting feedback from customers, you know, the actual people who determined whether you had a job, and worse, you called them the problem instead of just listening. You and the entire product team from top to bottom deserve the outcome you got. I'm not saying you should remain unemployed, but nobody should ever hire you to develop games again. Go find a career where you can both be happy and leave us alone to be happy with good games. I'll leave it there. Let me know what you guys think about the latest, as Josh Sobel, the infamous Highguard dev, has returned. And his new statement, as you saw. Let me know what you think about all that. Thank you for tuning in. Have a lovely week, and I'll catch you next time.